I want to look at the context of where we're at real quick. The last chapter we looked at was Matthew chapter 14 last week. So some things have happened since then. Actually, a lot of traveling has happened since then. So starting in about chapter 15, Jesus winds up all the way up in Tyre and Sidon, which is way up here. This is about the furthest away that he ever gets from Jerusalem, which is the last place he winds up in his life. So he is super far away in Tyre and Sidon. The story that happens there is there's a faithful Canaanite woman who says, even the dogs eat the scraps from the table, if you remember that story. So that happens all the way up here. Then he goes to some mountain near Galilee. So he travels probably around this area. There's a few mountains. There's mountains all around this area, but so probably a mountain near here. You see this Mount Tabor is marked, but it could be any mountain in this area. That's where he does the feeding of the 4,000. Then he and his disciples travel to the other side of Galilee. So he's just over here somewhere. And then he travels from there up to Caesarea Philippi. So that's way up here again. And that's where Peter makes the great confession. Confesses him to be the Son of the living God. And then that's where Simon, his name turns to Peter. And at that point, that's when Jesus first reveals his true mission of coming to this world to die for our sins and to be raised on the third day. After that, he goes to a high mountain somewhere. Could be anywhere in here. And that's where the transfiguration happens. So we missed out on the transfiguration, but that's okay. And after that, he reveals that he came to this world to die a second time. And then he winds up in Capernaum, which is right here. So that's where we're at right now. What happened in Capernaum just before this is the paying of the temple tax. So, some people come to his disciples saying, "Why don't you guys pay the tax?" And Jesus is like, "Well, who pays the tax, the sons or the servants?" And his disciples say, "The sons do." And he says, "So then the sons are free, but just to appease these people, we're going to go out, get a fish, in its mouth will be a coin, and use that to pay the tax." So all that stuff has happened until Matthew chapter 18. And so here we are. So they're still in Capernaum, and he's sitting around the city with his disciples, teaching, potentially doing miracles, etc. So chapter 18. Why is this important that we know his whole journey here and what's going on? The fact that he's revealed twice now that he's going to be going to Jerusalem to die. Jesus is, at this point in the book, drawing very near to the cross. The sins of the people he is dying for have got to be on his mind, even more intensely than they used to be. He is on his way. After Capernaum, he basically just makes his way towards Jerusalem. That's like he almost takes a beeline there. And so because he's starting that journey, those sins must be on his mind. And we start seeing whole chapters that are devoted to his teaching throughout the different Gospels. We see whole chapters devoted in this time period to him talking about sin, him talking about how to avoid it, how God thinks about it, the consequences of it. And so this is one of those chapters where if you look at the whole context, the whole thing is about sin. You can tell that Christ is thinking about the sins of the people that he's having to die for. So any questions or comments so far? If not, we'll go ahead and get reading. John, do you want to go ahead and read the first 6 verses?
This is from the New King James. At that time, the disciples came to Jesus saying, "Who then is greatest in the kingdom of heaven?" Then Jesus called a little child to him, set him in the midst of them, and said, "Assuredly, I say to you, unless you are converted and become as little children, you will by no means enter the kingdom of heaven. Therefore, whoever humbles himself as this little child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. Whoever receives one little child like this in my name receives me. Whoever causes one of these little ones who believe in me to sin, it would be better for him if a millstone were hung around his neck and he were drowned in the depth of the sea." Just through 6?
Yeah, that's it. how does it seem that does Jesus appreciate the comment of who is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven? Does he seem like he was pretty cool with that statement, or what was his response emotionally to that?
Well, it's a teaching opportunity for him because this is on their minds, really. Besides these disciples, the rest of the Jews are looking for that king to come and relieve them from the Roman oppression, and so this is also sort of on their minds. It's a very important question for him to tackle here, to understand this earthly, the spiritual, and such, and because there's some deep teaching that's going on here, especially with them, to understand this.
Yeah, to flip their mindset from physical kingdom to spiritual kingdom. Any other comments about how he would respond to who's going to be the top? Who's the leader in heaven? Does anyone have other thoughts about that?
It's God, but so it's another example of Christ when his teaching's deflecting questions to show the teaching. He'll show them.
Right. I mean, we can definitely see from him going as far as it would be better if you hung a millstone around your neck and died in the sea. We can tell that he's kind of frustrated by that statement, knowing that that's not the kind of people who even end up in the kingdom. People who end up in the kingdom are not seeking to be the greatest; they're seeking to be a servant, and he will get to that teaching.
It seems like they missed the whole point of Christ in his coming. I mean, if him being God came to this earth and lived a humble life as he did, how can his disciples not have the same mindset? And it's almost, that emphasizing that point of humility.
Yeah, and he's really running out of time because again, we are on track to Jerusalem, where he'll do the triumphal entry, and then he'll be led to the cross, essentially. So he knows, his human side absolutely knows that he feels the pressure of he's running out of time. My disciples still don't get it. They're asking me who's going to be like second in command in heaven, and that's like A, not their place, and B, not the point. And so you can see his frustration.
In verse 3 it says that they're not converted. So after all this time, they're truly not even true believers,
Yeah, so how he does this teaching, in verse 2, so they say, who is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven? Verse 2, he doesn't even say anything. And calling to him a child, he put him in the midst of them. So he takes some small child and puts him right front and center in the middle of all the other disciples. They're all maybe standing around, semicircle, full circle, doesn't, whatever mind picture you want, and points to this child. It says, truly I say to you, unless you turn and become like children, you will never, or you will not enter the kingdom of heaven. That's such a strong statement from Christ, from our Savior. What does it mean to repent and become like a child?
Become submissive.
Okay, good.
Trust. Accept. If you're old enough to understand, your parents have the best in mind for you, and sometimes even though you don't understand it and don't agree with it, you have to go along with it.
Yeah, that's like another word for that might be like obedience. He's looking for, unless you become obedient like this child or submissive like this child, kind of similar mindsets, yeah.
Also, children don't really have any authority, so I think he's trying to let them know that he's not going to have authority because you want to be childlike and hard.
Yeah. I have 3 key words down here just so you guys know. So once I find those 3 key words, then we can move on. But yes, that's a super good one. Any others? Okay, I heard 2 innocents. Yes, that's one of my key words. Very good. So, and what does it mean to be innocent? Does it mean to never do any wrong? No, it doesn't. It doesn't have anything to do with sinlessness. It's more of good intentions. Always good intentions. Always thinking the best of situations and of people, and of what else? Someone else describe innocence.
When you're innocent, as children are, usually the prejudices are not there.
Right, yeah.
We have a lot of built-in prejudices in regard to the reality of life that we live in. And so we make certain judgments on people. And I remember this very distinctly when I was in high school once. There was a guy, and I had thoughts about him like, this guy's arrogant and idiot and all this stuff. I became friends with him and realized he was actually a really great guy. And I remember always thinking about this, thinking, boy, I had such prejudices of this guy, and he ended up not being anything like that.
Yeah.
You know, and kids are like that. They'll play in a big group of kids together, right? Because they don't have any of those prejudices built in from the reality of life that we live in, where we get influenced by things.
Mm-hmm. There's one more word that I'm looking for, and it's actually in these next verses.
Mm-hmm.
You can see the other word I'm looking for. Humble, yeah. So what does it mean to be humble? As opposed to innocent, as opposed to obedient or submissive. What does humble mean as its own thing?
It means you'll do it even if you don't agree with it.
Okay, yeah. It means you see yourself lower. Okay. Any other? So, humble here is actually this Greek word, tapiinu. So this word has two meanings. I'll write them up here on the board. So one is to depress. So depress, like to push down, depress. And the other is to humiliate. Oh, there's another S there. Humiliate. Interestingly, humble is actually not a definition of that Greek word. It's a meaning that the translators and almost all translators have used for that. But the technical definitions are either to depress or to humiliate. So going along with we talked about how Christ was using some harsh language, both the hanging a millstone around your neck and drowning yourself in the sea, and unless you turn, you will not enter the kingdom of heaven. You know, very, very strong language. And so this tapiinu is another very strong word. He's not like, oh, you need to humble yourself and become like children. No, you need to humiliate yourself. You need to push yourself down. You need to know your place, basically. And so, you know, that's very interesting. It definitely gives us a little bit stronger meaning of what he's talking about here. And because he used this word to depress and humiliate, you know, that child that's in the middle, I don't think that little kid is smiling. I think he's embarrassed. He doesn't know what he's doing. He might be looking at his toes. You know, all these adults are around, and Jesus is here kind of using not strong language, but forceful language. You know, he doesn't know why he's there. He's just been sat in the middle of a bunch of adults. And Jesus is pointing to him saying, unless you become like this child, you're not going to enter into the kingdom of heaven. Looking down at his toes, doesn't feel like he's probably meant to be there. Understanding that he didn't put himself there. You know, Jesus set him in the middle of the disciples. You know, it's a very interesting image that I think Jesus is painting, not necessarily for everyone, but especially when we try to build ourselves up. This is the image that we need to put in our minds to put us back to a state where we can enter the kingdom of heaven. Because unless we become like that, we can't. So those are my thoughts on that. Does anyone have any other thoughts about that? Oh, actually, verse 6, this is my other Greek word. So verse 6, whoever causes one of these little ones who believe in me to sin or to stumble, it'd be better for him to have a great millstone. So that word stumble, whoever causes one of these little ones to stumble or to sin, that's this word right here, scandalizo. So we get the word scandalize from that. Whoever scandalizes one of these kids. And then that word literally means either to trap or trip up. To stumble. And to entice to sin. apostasy. My handwriting is really terrible. Or displeasure. So, I mean, that's translated pretty well exactly what it is. Whoever calls one of these little ones to trip up or to sin. So that's translated pretty well exactly. But it's interesting that the word scandalize is in here. And again, that's another, to us, that's a pretty strong word. If you're scandalized, that's a pretty strong word. So any thoughts before we move on?
Boy, that's sure happening a lot today in today's world. A lot of people out there trying to take children's innocence.
Scandalize them, yeah. So that's, as Christians, as parents, as friends, as influencing people, we have to take it very seriously, because Jesus said it would be better if we hung a millstone around our neck and threw ourselves into the ocean than scandalize a child. So we have to take that very, very seriously.
It's also within the church, right? Because the elders have a responsibility, and deacons and teachers and so forth, not to lead astray and to be part of the falling away in the apostasy, as you mentioned, which is in part of my, you guys don't know this, but my class is going to deal with a lot of this, the apostasy, the falling away, and be part of the truth. But outside, of course, there's outside influences. But within the church, where a lot of the apostasy is prophesized, this falling away, and we know that elders, in terms of the seriousness of their role, cannot lead the church away. It would better be to have a millstone put around their neck, right? It's so important that elders keep the church in the right path.
Right, exactly. Peter, would you be okay reading verses 7 through 9?
It says, "Woe to the world because of offenses, for offenses must come, but woe to that man by whom the offenses come. If your hand or foot causes you to sin, cut it off and cast it from you. It is better for you to enter into life lame or maimed, rather than having 2 hands or 2 feet, to be cast into everlasting fire. And if your eye causes you to sin, pluck it out and cast it from you. It is better for you to enter into life with 1 eye, rather than having 2 eyes to be cast into a hell fire."
Okay, so Jesus is still pretty intense right now, still saying some pretty intense things. In verse 7, why does Jesus say that it is necessary for, some versions say temptations to come, or necessary for offenses? Why would Jesus say that it's necessary for these things to happen? Considering he was about to die for our offenses, die for our sins, it's weird that same person would say it's necessary that they happen. Go ahead.
Well, it's because it's in our nature. Invariably, offenses are going to happen because we all are mortal. We are all sinners. We all err, and offenses are going to happen invariably.
Right. So to me, that smacks of the fact that we all have free will. For God to be a loving God, he must have given us free will. Otherwise, we wouldn't have been able to choose to love him back. And so, because we all have free will, some of us will freely will to do good, and many of us will freely will to do bad. And because we all live on the same world, we all interact with each other, all of us who have free will interact with each other, for better or worse. And so that's one way of looking at it, for sure, is that just because we have free will, it is necessary, because God gave that to us, that in intermingling with other people, we will experience sin. Is there like another way of looking at this that's biblical?
Well, Michael, Christ himself was tempted.
Mm-hmm.
He is God, and he was tempted. Then obviously, as humans, we're going to be tempted.
Right. Jesus, in his human side, was definitely tempted. Right. So he's like, if I got to go through it, you got to go through it. That's definitely a good way of looking at it. There's one more that I actually have some verses to look at. So let me get some volunteers to read some verses real quick. Someone read James chapter 1, verses 2 through 4. Do we got a volunteer for that? Okay, cool. Proverbs 17, verse 3. Okay. and Psalm chapter 66, verse 10. Okay. So James chapter 1, verses 2 through 4, whenever you got it.
Count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds, for you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness. And let steadfastness have its full effect, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing.
Okay, Proverbs chapter 17, verse 3.
The refining pot is for silver and the furnace for gold, but the Lord tests the hearts.
Psalm chapter 66, verse 10.
For you, O God, have tested us. You have tried us as silver is tried.
So a very consistent and somewhat common theme in the Bible is that when we go through trial, when we go through offenses, when we are tempted, that when we succeed, that builds up our soul. It's like a refining fire. It builds our faith. It shows us, it allows us to become more intimate with grace and how that affects our lives. It builds character. As I'm a new dad, I'm going to be saying that a lot to my son. It builds character whenever he goes through things, scraping his knee, etc. And so maybe that's another thing to think about what he means here. It's necessary for offenses to come. It's necessary for temptations to sin, because otherwise, how are you going to grow? God has made, part of his plan in this world is that we are meant to grow through suffering, through sin, through offenses. So that's another way. I think all those are legitimate.
The biblical knowledge can, sorry, go ahead.
Matthew 7:24, it tells us how to, what to build our strength on, and it tells us that storms are going to come. Mm-hmm. It warns us, and so Christ in Matthew 7:24 is telling us how to strengthen us that we can go against those storms and fight those storms, and obviously that building our faith upon the rock.
Right.
Well, I mean, certain experiences help you have a mindset and how to tackle certain things, but biblical knowledge comes through knowledge. When you talk about growth, Bible knowledge, of understanding the Bible, the Word, and that's exactly how you deal with those temptations, much like Joseph dealt with it, right? He ran away and so forth. By understanding the Bible, understanding what God wants you to do in the Word, helps you to actually deal with that, as opposed to only relying on your natural instinct and behavior, which isn't as strong as the Word is.
Right, exactly. Yeah, God definitely throughout the Word gives us instruction for how to overcome, and he says he will be with us to help us as well. But so, in that verse 7, woe to the world for temptations to sin or for offenses. For it is necessary that temptations come, but woe to the one by whom the temptations come. We're not supposed to be the one who gives those temptations. Moving on, because we are time limited. Why would Jesus tell us to cut off our hands and feet and to pluck out our eyes?
Because he's emphasizing it doesn't matter what it takes to get into heaven. The most extreme thing, do it, if that's what it requires to get to heaven.
Yeah, Jesus is definitely talking in kind of extreme language here, throwing yourself into the ocean with a millstone around your neck, etc. He's definitely speaking in kind of extremes. I think in a teaching kind of way, in a way to impress upon the people how this is important. We are easy prey for Satan. He knows our weaknesses. We say that all the time. We are easy prey for him. He'll find every weakness we have to try to keep us out of heaven. And again, Jesus is on his way. He is on the direct path to do what it takes to get us into heaven. And so it's incredibly important to him that we, as many of us as possible, make it. And he's about to say a little parable here about that. But so that's what's on his mind, is he wants us all to get into heaven. And because we're easy prey, anything that we can do to escape the tempter, he wants us to pursue. So let's move on into verses 10 through 14. I'd like someone who either has KJV, NKJV, or NASV to read this. So anyone who has that version, verses 10 through 14.
Can you say that again?
Someone with New King James, or New American Standard. Okay, Paul.
Chapter 14, New King James Version.
Okay.
Take heed that you do not despise one of these little ones, for I say to you that in heaven their angels always see the face of my Father who is in heaven. For the Son of Man has come to save that which is lost. What do you think? If a man has 100 sheep and one of them goes astray, does he not leave the 99 and go to the mountains to seek the one that is straying? And if he should find it, assuredly I say to you, he rejoices more over that sheep than over the 99 that did not go astray. Even so, it is not the will of your is it not the will of your Father who is in heaven that one of these little ones should perish?
Okay, so this is what I was referring to when the little parable, Jesus wants all of us to make it to heaven. So he says this parable about the lost sheep. He's really enforcing the fact that he does not want to lose a single one of us to sin. He'll pursue us when we go astray. He'll rejoice when we come home. And I've had a thought about this while doing the study. It seems to me that there is no 99. We have all sinned and fallen short of the glory of God, and so we are all the one lost sheep. There's not some church out here full of perfect people who have not gone astray. There's not some segment of the building who is reserved for those who are still in the fold, and then a segment of the building where those of us who are lost come home to. We are all, at times, the lost sheep. The 99 is not the point of this lesson, of this parable. It seems as though he's made another exaggeration, like the cutting off of the hands and feet, like the hanging the millstone around your neck. What he's trying to show is that as if you were my one lost sheep, as if you were the only one that I cared about in this moment, that's how I pursue you. That's how I rejoice when you come home and celebrate with the angels in heaven, with the friends when you return. He's really trying to impress upon us that when we are gone, he cares about us. When we are in sin, he desperately wants us to come back. Any questions, comments, concerns about that?
Well, Michael, you're correct. Hence, verse 11: "For the Son of Man has come to save that which was lost." This shepherd died for all. And you think on that day where they spat upon him, they slapped him, they mocked him, they scourged him, yet he still did that for all.
Yeah. So that's I've been thinking on that these past couple weeks. That was an interesting thought that came to me out of nowhere, and I'm like, I've never thought of it that way. That kind of there is no 99 that I have to compare myself to. Each of us are one. And as we are all God's servants out in the world and we're trying to shed his light, each person we come across, each soul that we come in contact with is also the one. It's just an interesting thought. We're going to move on because we don't have time. But another thought I had about this and some research that I've done, verse 10, "See that you do not despise one of these little ones, for I tell you that in heaven their angels always see the face of my Father who's in heaven." So that we know that this is out there and exists. This verse is often used by people who believe in it of guardian angels, just so you know. The thought is that if he's saying that they have angels, they're still alive, and so why would they have angels in heaven? Like, that's not their spirit, it's some other angel. They can point to verses of, like in Revelation, where there's angels over the churches. They point to, in Hebrews, like angels serve the believers in the church. So just so you know, that's out there. Whatever your belief is, we'll know when we get to heaven, one way or the other on that.
Let me just make a comment.
Sure.
The Bible nowhere endorses the idea of guardian angel. We can look around and see a lot of children that get hurt, get sick, even die. And if that's the case, if they all have guardian angels, where was the guardian angel when that happened?
Right, and yeah, I'm not saying that it's true. I'm just saying that, just so you know, this verse is an interesting verse that sometimes people will point to. And so we need to make sure that we have have a thought about it so that we can not protect, but defend our faith when we come up against them.
I think it's important to understand the context of this chapter. You know, it starts out with the disciples coming to Jesus asking, who's the greatest?
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at all these examples, you see Jesus emphasizing the importance of every individual, you know, in the kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
You see him emphasizing that that we shouldn't have these prejudice. We shouldn't have divisions and different things within the church, that every member is important. And I think this is emphasized even in this parable of the lost sheep, where he starts out and talks about how important an individual is, you know, is as important as thinking that, oh, there's an angel assigned. You know, I'm not saying that that's what is occurring there, but he's emphasizing the importance of individuals within the kingdom.
Yeah, very good. Yeah.
Just so you know, people who promote that idea, they also use Acts chapter 12 and verse 15. If you're interested in that, look it up later.
Yeah, I would like to get to the end, but we probably won't. But anyways, so this verse is this chunk is full of controversial things, but we got to look at them because they're in the Bible, and if they're in the Bible, then we have to take them seriously. So verse 11. So the reason why I asked someone with KJV, New King James, or NASV to read is because verse 11 is not found in many modern day Bibles. It's not, and the reason for that is because it's not found in a lot of the most complete and most old, most ancient manuscripts we have. These ones, the Vaticans, the Sinaitus, the Regius, the Corodethi, the Basli, the Mount Atlas, the Jerusalem, and the Paris. All these manuscripts are very complete manuscripts of the New Testament, of Matthew specifically, very, very, very old, dated. And so because that verse is not found in those, it's widely agreed nowadays by scholars that this verse 10 was actually verse 11 was lifted from Luke chapter 19, verse 10, which is basically the same thing, to kind of better transition into the parable of the lost sheep. Is this conversation about this verse a problem with the Bible?
Not at all.
No, not at all. Okay, tell me why. Someone.
There's variances in the Bible. I mean, going from any language to another language, you're going to have things that don't translate the best, you know. And so there's variances. I think there's 30,000 variances in our English-speaking Bible, but they don't mean anything. They don't change the word. They don't change anything. Most of them are typos, you know, or just reverse letters, you know.
Well, this adds a whole verse to the Bible.
And it does.
Yeah.
It does. But again, it just comes down to contextual variances. The older ones don't have it. The newer ones, maybe a scribe added it, you know, and so that's why we had the footnote that tells us, hey, just so you know, this may or may not be, you know, there.
So I approach this a little differently, Michael. Like, I've had these conversations, and people will use things like that, and then they'll say, well, I don't believe the Bible because it's not translated correctly, or we have all these little variations, like, why is that verse missing? Why is this? And I always go back to this. If you believe in God to be a sovereign God, to raise the dead, to do anything, you are telling me that he's going to leave me down here with a word that is going to cause me to lose my salvation. That's the kind of God he is, and no, he's not that kind of God. So if you accept that God is perfect and that his will is for you to be in heaven, then you have to accept that what we have here is what's going to get us there, even if men are fallible and may translate this word wrong or over here and this isn't missing. That's my take on it. I'm not saying that's gospel, but that's how I...
Yeah, so I would say, what doctrine is changed by adding or removing this verse?
Right. Exactly.
None. There's no doctrine that's changed. In fact, it's just another thing that Jesus said. So it's not even that some other person's words were put in here. And the statement is true. Jesus has come to save the lost. In Luke chapter 19, verse 10, it's Jesus has come to seek and to save the lost. So either way, it's the same. And again, it does kind of transition into this story of the lost sheep. Whether it makes it like better or more poetic or something, doesn't matter. As long as we know that it's there. Again, we need to know these things because this is the word that we believe in, and we need to know a little bit of the history about it so we can talk about it and we can defend ourselves from, like Miss Mandy was saying, the non-believers who may come at us with little things like this. So changes no doctrine whatsoever, so that's okay. Okay, verses 15 through 20. Who would like to read? Nick, could you read? Nick, yeah.
If your brother sins against you, go and tell him his fault between you and him alone. If he listens to you, you have gained your brother. But if he does not listen, take one or two others along with you, that every charge may be established by the evidence of 2 or 3 witnesses. If he refuses to listen to them, tell it to the church. And if he refuses to listen even to the church, let him be to you as a Gentile and a tax collector. Truly I say to you, whatever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. Again, I say to you, if 2 of you agree on earth about anything they ask, it will be done for them by my Father in heaven. For where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, there I am among them.
Okay, so let's look at, kind of zoom in on verses 15 through 17. So, by the way, we're still on the same mindset of sin. Jesus is still thinking about sin and how it affects us and how he doesn't want any of us to participate in it, and that we all must go through it at some point. We must all suffer temptation or offenses. And so, I find it curious that Jesus isn't giving instruction to the people who have committed the trespass, but he says that the one who is offended, the one who is offended is responsible for approaching their brother. I find that interesting. I've not really ever thought about how that's the first thing that Jesus addresses. If someone else offends you, it's not their job. Well, it can be their job, but the first thing he addresses is, if you've been offended, go and talk to that person. I think especially in the church. In fact, even mainly in the church, especially since he says, if your brother sins against you. So in the kingdom, we have a responsibility that if we feel some kind of way about something someone has said to us, done to us, said about us behind our backs, if we take any kind of offense, then our first job is to go and talk to them. Not to talk to our kids about it, not to talk to our best friend at work about it. Go talk to them and make it right. And if you can't make it right, then there's a list of things to do. Of course, after this, Peter does seek more advice about this topic, which hopefully we'll get to in this parable of the unforgiving servant, which is a little bit later. But it is curious that this is kind of the teaching that comes to Jesus' heart and mind first, is to instruct those who have been offended, not to give instruction to those who think they might have offended someone else. Thoughts about that?
Well, one reason is that a lot of times people don't even know that they've offended someone. And, they didn't have any ill intention. And so the one who's offended is given the responsibility to make that known to the person.
Yeah, sometimes it's easy for us to be in our own heads and assume that our experience is someone else's experience. I hear all of the time at work, because I'm surrounded by people who are in the world. I work at a factory. Oh, he knew what he was doing when he said that to me. He or she knew exactly what they were going to do to me. They were trying to ruin my day when they said that, when they told this other person this. Maybe. Go talk to them about it and you'll see. All the time when I go and talk to somebody, people are reasonable. People are very easy to talk to. If you want to make your relationship right with them, everyone wants to be the good guy. Everyone wants to be liked and to have friends. And that applies to the person who who said the thing about you. Maybe they thought they were being funny. If you don't think that that's funny, go say, hey, I don't think that's funny. I have my reasons for that. Oh, hey man, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to offend you. It almost always goes very, very well when people just talk to each other.
Again, we see the wisdom here with this, with Christ's words about how to prevent divisions, within the brotherhood. Go to that individual, and that's gonna prevent division versus going to someone else and saying, oh, do you know what so and so did, or that's going to cause division and strife and hard feelings. But if we do what God has instructed us to do within the church, that's going to show the importance, the value of every person, and it's going to prevent that division from happening within the church.
That's going to save us a lot of stress because we won't be worried about, oh man, what did they mean? Why did they do this? Just go talk to them, and then they'll tell you, and then you don't have to worry about it anymore. So yeah, very, very good teaching here from Christ. And then he goes straight on into, let's look at verses 18 through 20. Why does he follow up with this? Most of my young life, it just seemed out of the far corner of nowhere why he started saying this. What does it even mean? This seems very controversial. Can we just say things on earth and that becomes a law in heaven? What does that mean? A lot of people are very confused about these verses. So then, what does it mean that whatever we bind on earth is bound in heaven, etc.?
Well, you got to understand who the audience is here. This binding is not for us. This was the apostles, in terms of the things that they would do after his death, which is Acts. I always forget Acts. The first day of the week is one example. I think it's Acts. Is it Acts 20:28? Whatever meet on the first day of the week was what they call apostolic authority. They received apostolic authority in terms of the things that they bound here, since they were endued with the power of the Holy Spirit. Things, and so they were able to do things. These are not for us. We are not binding and loosening on earth, and this is done with.
Yeah, so that's what a lot of people use on these verses, and actually then they'll take that mindset, multiple steps too far. There's some denominations who believe that if you get enough Christians together, it says in verse 20, for where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, there I am among them. He kind of ends off with that. They believe that this is saying that if you can get a little prayer group together, then that's how you perform miracles, because you say, okay, God, we want you to heal this person of cancer, and so whatever we bind on earth, so now it's going to happen because we have 2 or 3 people, God's here with us, he'll make it happen for us. And I don't believe that that's what this is teaching at all. Again, because of context and everything. But
so he was talking to his disciples, and as you mentioned a couple of different times, Jesus is getting very, very close to leaving this earth, and so he's saying he's giving them the authority to do these things, and we as a church have the authority to do these things as long as we do what he says and not more than what he says or less. These things apply to us in the fact that in regards to disciplining or winning back an erring brother.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so we're out of time. But so I just want to say, I definitely think that this is, because his last thing is okay, if you have an issue with someone, take it all the way to the church if that's the issue. And then if even they reject what the church says, treat him as a Gentile and a tax collector. So exile him, essentially. I think that this is teaching, it's a promise, it's a warning about church discipline. If an offense is taken all the way to congregational level and no repentance is shown, then count him as an outsider, and that will be the view of heaven as well. If you're kicked out of the church in this world, then that'll be bound in heaven in the same way. If you've offended people in the church enough, then you can lose your salvation through that. And that's a scary thing. Okay, that's our time. Thank you.